Hey guys, my name is Chris Winter, and in this video I thought I would do a quick comparison between two very popular cameras which you might be considering buying. Now the very first one is the Canon SL2 or 200D if you're outside of America, and also the newer and a little bit smaller Canon M50. Now both of these cameras are really quite similar in terms of specs. They've got a few differences in terms of size and a few other things like that, but I just want to figure out which one might be the best camera for you. So I'll go over a few of my things that I find are kind of pros and cons of each of the cameras. Hopefully I'll be able to teach you which one might be the better camera for you. By the way guys, I'm currently doing a massive camera giveaway to one lucky subscriber. You can win either a Canon M50, a Canon T7 or a Nikon D3500 and a lens of your choice from my epic lens list, which you can see in the description box below. All you need to do to enter is leave a comment on this video and tell me which camera and lens from the list you want to win. And guys, if you make YouTube videos, definitely make sure to check out my brand new list that I just made, the best cameras for YouTube. I go through some of the cameras that would be best for you. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description box below this video and you can take a look. But anyway, let's now start this comparison video. So to start off this comparison, I first want to talk about the size and weight of these cameras. And that's one of the big differences between the Canon M50 and the SL2. As you can see here, I've got the Canon M50, and this is a mirrorless camera, which means it's going to be a lot smaller than the SL2 because that itself has a mirror. Now, if you're new to photography, you might not really know the difference of why one would have a mirror, one would have no mirror. But essentially, if you take off the lens here, you can see that on the inside, the Canon M50 has its sensor right there. Hopefully you can see that there. And it's not protected by a mirror. Now, being a DSLR, the Canon SL2, on the other hand, does have a mirror. It's just the way in which it takes photos. Mirrorless is a little bit newer. The SL2 here does have a mirror that you can see right there. And that's one reason why this is going to be a slightly larger camera. Now, in terms of the overall feel of these cameras, the SL2 is still quite a small DSLR. If you compare it to something like a Canon 80D or a Canon 6D Mark II, it's still a very small DSLR, but overall, the M50 is quite a significantly smaller camera. Now, lenses as well on the Canon M50 are quite a lot smaller as well, which is something you want to take into consideration. For example, we've got the Canon 15 to 45mm lens here, which is really quite small. And again, if you want to compare it, we've got the 18 to 55mm lens, quite similar in terms of focal length. And this one here is quite a lot larger as well, even though this one here is quite a small lens. Now, which camera is going to be better for you in terms of size? Well, it's really going to depend on what you're going to be using your camera for. Now, if you're going to be traveling a lot, the M50 is probably going to be the better bet because it is very small, it's very compact, but it still does have a lot of the features that the Canon SL2 does have. You know, I mean, it's got a flip-out screen which is fully articulating, which is great. They really have made this into a very small package. You've still got a viewfinder, albeit it's an electronic viewfinder. You've still got a microphone jack. But if you're happy to have a slightly larger DSLR and you maybe want something that's going to be a little bit more robust, the Canon M50 might be the choice for you. Again, this has also got the flip-out screen, it's a touch screen, it's got the microphone jack, and it does have all of the other bells and whistles such as Dual Pixel Autofocus as well. So the big difference here is whether you want a really small camera that's going to be great for travel, or if you're happy to have a slightly larger camera that might be a little bit more robust and it might hold on to larger lenses as well. Now, I do want to point out something quickly in terms of the size and weight of these cameras. Now, the Canon M50 does have a smaller lens lineup, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later in this video. But for example, we've got the 15 to 45mm lens, and there might be in total 20 or 30 lenses for the Canon EOS M series. Whereas the Canon SL2 can pretty much take any lens from Canon and a whole lot of other third-party brands such as Sigma and Tamron and Tokina. And if you do want to use the Canon M50 with some of those other lenses, you'll have to use this thing here, which is an adapter. Now this adapter here, it's an EF-S to EOS M adapter. This is always going to make your camera a little bit bigger. And again, if you do want to be using the Canon EOS M with this adapter, it's always going to be a little bit bigger. So you've got to take that into consideration. You really want to be choosing the lenses which are going to be right for you. But overall, in terms of size and portability, the M50 is a lot better in terms of that. Now, another small thing that's kind of maybe not the biggest thing on your mind, but I found is actually quite important, is the battery life on both of these cameras. And I actually found that the Canon SL2 was significantly better than the Canon M50, and that was one of the downfalls of the M50. The battery life on this camera is not super great, and it's probably as you'd expect because it is a smaller camera, which in turn means it does have a smaller battery. But I did find that the Canon SL2 really does kind of crush the Canon M50 in terms of battery life. Now, I was able to get around about 680 shots with the Canon SL2. Sometimes it was 620, sometimes it was up to 680, but it really was quite a good performer, especially compared to other Rebel series cameras, which in the past were not so good. Now, the Canon SL2 uses this battery here, which is an LPE17. It's not a bad battery. It's not as good as something like a Canon LPE6, which is found in things like the Canon 80D, but it is really quite good. On the other hand, we've got the Canon M50, which does have a pretty annoying battery draw as well, I must say. And this one here is using the Canon LPE12 battery, which is a little bit different. So again, this is it is quite a significant difference in terms of the battery size. In terms of video mode, again, the Canon SL2 was still slightly better, although they were a little bit more comparable than the M50's. One of its biggest downfalls is its battery life. So you probably will want to buy a few batteries for the Canon M50 if you are going to be shooting for a whole day. On the other hand, another really nice feature on the Canon M50 is its continuous burst mode, where it can shoot up to 10 frames per second. Now, the Canon SL2 is actually still pretty good. It can shoot 5 frames per second, which is quite quick for a beginner DSLR or a entry-level DSLR. But 10 frames per second really does put the Canon M50 up into comparison of something like a Canon 7D Mark II, which is a dedicated sports camera. Now, granted, this is a mirrorless camera, so it's going to have a lot easier time of getting up to 10 frames per second, and there are some drawbacks. You'll always have to be a little bit careful with the motion and things like that. But if you are going to be doing things like sports or wildlife, the Canon M50 is probably going to be a better bet for you, because 10 frames per second is going to be more than quick enough to shoot if you're going to be at a hockey game or something like that. You're really going to be able to shoot very, very fast with that, and you're not going to be able to miss any of those kind of shots because 10 frames in 1 second is really quite quick. Now, for most day-to-day shooting, you're never going to be even going close to 10 frames per second. In fact, I probably wouldn't recommend shooting more than 2 or 3 shots in a burst, if not just one. But it's definitely something to take into consideration if you want to be doing something like wildlife shooting, you want to be shooting birds, or if you want to be doing sports shooting as well, because that's really where it comes into its own. So definitely the winner in terms of continuous burst rate. The M50 is easily the winner here. 10 frames per second, very, very quick. Now, one thing that's obviously very, very important with both of these cameras is the video mode. And both of these cameras are really quite popular as beginner video cameras because they have some really good features. And I'll talk about a few of the features that they share first, and then a few features that they've got individually. So on the M50 and the SL2, obviously they've got the Canon Dual Pixel, which is really fantastic, and it's one of the reasons why I still recommend these cameras over other cameras from Panasonic and Sony, and of course Nikon as well. The Dual Pixel is still, to me, the best autofocusing system in any camera, simply because it's got a really cinematic and smooth autofocus. Now, what is Dual Pixel? Well, essentially it means that you can pretty much point your camera wherever you want, and whatever is in the frame is going to continuously, smoothly, and cinematically come into focus, and it works really fantastic. In fact, I'm actually using Dual Pixel Autofocus right now on my Canon 70D. You can probably see that hopefully my face is in focus, and as I move back and forth to the side, my face stays in focus, and it's got face tracking on there as well, which works really quite well. So if you are going to be making YouTube videos, for example, where you want to not be having someone to help you film, having good autofocus is really, really key, and that's one of the great features about the Canon SL2 and the M50. They've also got that flip screen, which I mentioned briefly before. It's a fantastic feature, and it really does make a big difference, again, if you're going to be filming yourself, which a lot of people are these days with YouTube videos. You can flip the screen all the way around so you can actually see yourself and make sure that you're in frame and, of course, in focus as well, which is really quite important. And both of these cameras also have a touch screen, which makes life a lot easier. Again, coming back to that Dual Pixel autofocus, you can simply tap on the screen on your face and it's going to come into face tracking autofocus, or you can tap on an object and then another object and do a really nice cinematic focus pull, which means it goes from one focus point to another very, very nicely. So that's definitely something that I like. We've also got microphone jacks, which is a great thing for me and for all of you budding cinematographers, because as I've continuously said over the years, having great audio quality is just as important as having good video quality, if not more important, because a lot of people will put up with bad video quality. Maybe it's it's in 720p, people will still watch it. But if the audio quality is tinny, or it's got a lot of noise, or it's echoey or something like that, or if you can't actually get an external microphone, generally it's not going to be great for the audio quality. So it's a really nice thing to see on the Canon SL2 and the M50 that we do have dedicated microphone jacks, which really is nice. One thing both of these cameras are unfortunately missing is a headphone jack, and it's definitely something I would have liked to have seen, and hopefully we'll get it on the next model. Unlikely on the SL2, but possibly on the successor to the M50. It would be really nice to be able to monitor your audio, because often there might be little problems. You might have, there might be a little bit of hiss coming from the microphone. It might not be plugged in properly, or it might not be plugged in at all, which has happened to a lot of us many times. So that's definitely something that I would like to see. Now, next up, what we're going to be talking about is the big difference, which is 4K, and we'll talk about that now. All right, so let's talk about 4K on the Canon M50. Obviously, the Canon M50 does shoot in 4K, whereas the Canon SL2 only shoots in 1080p. For a lot of people, this might be a game changer and it might be a deal breaker. But for me, I'll be honest, it's not a big deal for me, because I still shoot in 1080p for all of my YouTube videos for a few different reasons. Firstly, most people don't actually have 4K monitors to be able to watch 4K properly. And a lot of people don't have the internet capabilities to be able to watch 4K without it kind of buffering all of the time. But if you do want to shoot in 4K, I totally understand it. You might want to future-proof your videos. The Canon M50 is going to be the only one that can do that. And it's a really nice 4K image, but it does have some drawbacks, and I really want to kind of bring those to your attention before you go off and buy this camera. Firstly, the Canon M50 does have a crop in 4K. Now this is a standard APS-C size sensor, like I showed you before, which is a really nice large sensor, quite wide as well. But unfortunately, when you shoot in 4K, it does get a significant crop to your image, which means that you're going to be a lot more zoomed in, and you'll be needing to shoot with a wider lens. Now, if you've got a 15mm lens on the Canon M50, when you're going to be shooting in 4K, you might be more like a 24mm lens, and it's going to be a whole lot kind of more zoomed in than maybe you want it to be. The other issue is that when we do shoot in 4K with the Canon M50, we do unfortunately lose Dual Pixel Autofocus, which is one of the key selling points on this camera, and it's definitely something that I want you guys to think about if you are going to be buying this camera. Now, if you're going to be doing all manual focus, doesn't matter at all. The Canon M50 is definitely going to be the better bet, because you do have that 4K picture. It's going to be a lot sharper. But if you are going to be kind of relying on the autofocus in the 4K, it's not going to be great, and it's probably not something that I would recommend. So in terms of video, both of these are very good. And now, if you're going to be doing sit-down videos like me and you're happy to have slightly worse autofocus, the Canon M50 is going to be okay. If you're going to be shooting in 1080p, both of these cameras are going to be perfect. There's not a massive difference in terms of video quality with both of these cameras. So they're both great little video cameras, but if you do want 4K with its limitations, probably go for the M50. Now, I do quickly want to touch on something that I also find really quite important, and that is the amount of lenses that you can get on the Canon DSLR system compared to the kind of newer Canon M50 and EOS M system. So if you didn't know, Canon has something like 200 lenses which will fit onto the Canon SL2, from macro lenses to ultra wide angle lenses to prime lenses like a 35mm or a 50mm to 70 to 200 or 400mm lenses. Obviously those ones are going to be a lot more expensive, but with the Canon SL2 being an APS-C size sensor, it really does work with a lot of lenses, and this is definitely something you want to take into consideration. If you are just starting into the world of photography, do you want to start with something like a DSLR, which has got a lot of lenses, or do you want to possibly go with something like the Canon M50, which is kind of a newer system and unfortunately only has, maybe a tenth of those amounts of lenses. Now, that's not to say that this camera is limited in any ways, because you can obviously use an adapter which will allow you to pretty much use any of the Canon DSLR lenses, which is really great. But you are going to have to buy this adapter, and then you're kind of also losing the size of the Canon M50. So this is definitely something I want you guys to take into consideration. The Canon SL2 or the 200D is definitely going to have a lot more lenses to choose from that are native, which generally mean that they're going to have slightly better connectivity. You might be getting slightly better autofocus. But if you are kind of happy just, maybe shooting with a 15mm to 45mm, or you're happy to use an adapter, the Canon M50 is probably going to be the way to go. So I want to summarize this for you guys. Which camera should you choose? Now this video here, these videos are kind of me just rambling about some of the better features for each of these different cameras, and hopefully I can help you figure out which one might be right for you. So if you are looking for the ultimate kind of travel camera and you're very happy with like a lens like the 15 to 45 that generally comes with this camera, the Canon M50 is going to be the way to go. If you're also one of these people who likes to have the newest technology, you like to have an electronic viewfinder, you like to have that 10 frames per second burst mode, the Canon M50 is going to be the way to go. If you really want to have 4K, clearly the Canon M50 is going to be the way to go. On the other hand, if you like the traditional shape of a DSLR, the Canon SL2 is going to be the way to go. It's very traditional in size, but it's kind of just a shrunken down size of it, which is really quite nice. If you like the bigger buttons, the Canon SL2 is going to be the way to go. If you like to have a really large selection of lenses, the Canon SL2 is probably going to be the way to go, because you are going to be able to have access to all of those native glass lenses and also all of the third-party lenses, like from Sigma to Kino, Tamron, all of those. For me, which one would I choose? Well, it's a really difficult decision. I would probably generally still go for something like the Canon SL2, simply because of what I do, which is a lot of YouTube videos where I'm sitting down and the size of the camera really doesn't make a big difference. But if I was to be traveling, there's no doubt that I would be choosing the Canon M50. This is a fantastic camera for travel. It does pretty much everything that the Canon SL2 does, but also does a few extra things. So for me, if I'm going to be choosing a traveling camera, an everyday camera, which I just want to be bringing around all of the time, the Canon M50 is probably going to be the one that I would be choosing. And guys, if you make YouTube videos, definitely make sure to check out my brand new list that I just made, the best cameras for YouTube. I go through some of the cameras that would be best for you. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description box below this video and you can take a look. So there you go guys, two very, very nice cameras, especially in that kind of budget entry-level range. The M50 and the Canon SL2 are both fantastic cameras. Remember, the Canon SL2 is called the 200D outside of America. There's really no difference. They just have a funny kind of naming system. Both of these cameras are really quite nice. M50 if you want a smaller package for travel. SL2 if you want a traditional kind of camera. I think both of these are really nice. I really like using both of them, and I mean, I don't know which one I would actually choose. Fortunately, I have lots of other different cameras which I can choose from as well, but I do really like the Canon M50. I do need to put a special mention to this camera. They really have packed a lot of different features into this camera, and if you're looking to buy this camera, it's definitely one that I really do like. So there you go guys, hopefully I did help you even just a little bit with kind of my rambling series of comparison with these cameras. And yeah, if you did enjoy this video, I'd love it if you leave a thumbs up, because that's always appreciated. And that's it for me. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.